Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at SOC services.
Mhm.
We're going to try to understand what a SOC does and why it's become so essential,
Right.
especially, in today's evolving threat landscape. We're going to be looking at a couple of sources today. We have this great guide from Cuebid.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
It's really helpful. It lays out all the fundamentals. And then to bring it all to life, we'll be weaving in some real-world data from an Arctic Wolf threat report.
Yeah, that Arctic Wolf report is eye-opening, for sure.
Yeah.
There's some stuff in there that really highlights why a SOC is becoming less of a luxury and more of a necessity.
Definitely. I mean, just looking at the numbers from the report, the average ransom demand has gone up 20%
Wow.
year over year,
Yeah.
and now it sits at about $600,000.
It's crazy. And you know what's even more widespread than ransomware?
What's that?
Business email compromise scams, BEC scams.
BEC scams?
Yeah, the FBI estimates that there are 10 times more BEC scams than ransomware incidents.
Wow. So before we get too deep into all of that, though, let's just take a step back and make sure we're all on the same page. Could you just give us like a simple explanation of what a SOC is?
Sure. So basically, a SOC is like the central nervous system for your organization's cybersecurity. You bring together a team of experts and give them the tools they need to monitor, detect, and respond to threats. And this is happening 24/7. So it's like having a dedicated team constantly watching over your digital assets, analyzing every little thing that happens, and ready to jump into action if they see something suspicious.
So like a 24/7 security detail for your data.
Exactly.
I like that. Now, the Cuebid guide mentions this idea that absolute security doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
It's kind of unsettling.
Yeah.
But it really highlights why this proactive approach is so important, right?
Oh, absolutely. The threat landscape is constantly evolving. Attackers are always coming up with new ways to exploit vulnerabilities, and they're getting faster, too. The Arctic Wolf report found that in some cases, they can actually get into a system and steal data in less than 2 hours.
2 hours. That's unbelievable.
It is, and that's why this whole idea of a holistic security strategy is so important. That's something that Cuebid really emphasizes in their guide.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What do they mean by holistic?
Well, it's this recognition that security isn't just about having the right technology. It's about having a really comprehensive view of your entire digital landscape. So that means gathering information from your networks, devices, user activity, cloud services, everything. You need to see the complete picture.
Like having eyes and ears everywhere.
Exactly. You want to be able to spot those potential threats before they can do any real damage.
Now, Cuebid also talks about the 3 pillars of cybersecurity: protect and manage. It seems like a SOC really kind of embodies all 3.
Yeah, it really does. The protect pillar is all about building that strong foundation. Things like firewalls, secure configurations, multi-factor authentication. Then you've got the detect pillar, which is really where the SOC comes in. It's about using a variety of tools to identify and analyze potential threats before they can cause any harm. And then finally, you have the manage pillar, which is all about incident response remediation and constantly improving your overall security posture.
So it's not just about reacting to threats, it's about proactively preventing them in the first place.
Right.
So there are a few different ways a company can go about implementing a SOC. What are the main approaches that Cuebid lays out?
So the 3 main options are you can build an internal SOC, you can partner with an external provider for a managed detection and response service, or MDR, or you can opt for a hybrid approach that kind of combines elements of both.
Okay, let's start with internal SOCs. What are the key considerations for companies that are thinking about going that route?
Well, building an internal SOC means you're essentially building your own in-house security team and infrastructure. So you're responsible for recruiting and training personnel, investing in all the technology, setting up all the systems, and then you have to manage all of it 24/7.
It sounds like a pretty major undertaking.
It is. It requires a significant upfront investment, and you have all those ongoing operational costs. And then you also have to think about the challenge of finding and keeping qualified security professionals. There's a lot of demand out there.
Right, so it sounds like internal SOCs are probably a better fit for larger organizations that have the resources to dedicate to it.
That's generally the case, yeah. While some smaller businesses might choose this route if they have very specific needs or regulatory requirements, internal SOCs are definitely more common among those larger organizations that have the budget and the manpower to really support them.
So what about the alternative then, external SOCs or MDR? What are the advantages of going that route?
This is where it gets really interesting for a lot of businesses. MDR gives you a way to access those top-tier security experts and capabilities without having to build everything from scratch.
Yeah.
It's like you're partnering with a specialized security company that already has all the technology, all the expertise, all the infrastructure.
It's just like outsourcing your cybersecurity.
Exactly. And it comes with some big advantages. You get to work with a team of seasoned security analysts who are constantly monitoring and responding to threats. They've got cutting-edge technology, and they stay up to date on all the latest attack techniques. And you also benefit from a much faster deployment because you don't have to build everything yourself.
And from a cost perspective, I imagine MDR can be a lot more appealing to a lot of companies.
It's true.
Especially those that might not have the resources for a full-blown internal SOC.
Yeah, for a lot of companies, it just makes more sense. You're essentially paying for a service which is usually much more predictable and manageable than the costs of an internal SOC. Plus, you get to focus on your core business operations and have that peace of mind knowing that your data is in good hands.
We're definitely going to dig deeper into MDR a bit later. But first, let's touch on that third option. You mentioned the hybrid SOC. What does that look like?
So the hybrid approach is kind of like a middle ground. It's for those companies that already have some existing security infrastructure and maybe some in-house expertise, but they want to add to their capabilities with some external support.
So it's like augmenting your existing security with some extra specialized help.
Exactly. It lets you keep control over certain aspects of your security while taking advantage of the expertise and resources of an MDR provider for other areas. It can be a really good option for organizations that are maybe transitioning to a more mature security posture, or for those that have some specific needs that require additional support.
Okay, so now that we've kind of laid the groundwork here, let's peek behind the curtain a little bit and talk about the actual tools and technologies that make a SOC tick. I know it can get pretty technical, but could you give us kind of a simplified breakdown?
Sure. So think of a SOC as this high-tech command center that's equipped with all these different tools that are designed to detect, analyze, and respond to threats. And all of these tools are integrated into something called a SOC platform, which Cuebid describes as the central nervous system of the whole operation.
So it's like the mission control for your cybersecurity.
Yeah, exactly. It's where the analyst can get this unified view of everything that's happening across the network, the devices, the applications, the user activity. And within this platform, you have a whole range of specialized tools working together, things like SOM, SOAR, ADR.
Okay, let's break those acronyms down one by one. Let's start with SOM. What is that?
So SOM stands for Security Information and Event Management. And it's all about collecting and analyzing huge amounts of security data to try to identify any suspicious activity. It's like having a digital detective sifting through tons of data from all your systems, looking for those little clues that might indicate a hidden threat.
So it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, but with a super-powered magnifying glass.
Exactly. SIAM helps analysts separate the signal from the noise so they can focus on the events that really need further investigation. It gathers logs from all kinds of sources like firewalls, intrusion detection systems, servers, applications, user activity logs, and then it uses rules and algorithms to look for patterns that might suggest a threat.
Okay, so that leads us to SOAR, which stands for Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response.
Yeah.
What does SOAR do?
So SOAR kicks in after SIEM does its thing. It automates responses to threats, so it's like having these predefined sets of actions that automatically trigger when certain events happen. For example, if SIEM detects a suspicious login attempt, SOAR could automatically isolate the affected device, block the IP address, and send an alert to the security team.
So it's all about speed.
Yeah, exactly. SOAR helps streamline everything and speed up those response times. It reduces the need for manual intervention so analysts can focus on more complex issues.
Okay, and then Cuebid also mentions EDR, which is Endpoint Detection and Response. Why is EDR so important?
So EDR is focused on real-time threat detection and response on individual devices. It's like having a security guard stationed on each of your computers and servers, constantly looking out for anything malicious. And EDR goes beyond your traditional antivirus software. It analyzes things like behavior patterns, network traffic, and system changes to identify threats that might otherwise slip through the cracks.
So it's like adding an extra layer of protection at the device level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, where a lot of attacks originate.
Now, Cuebid also mentioned something called light EDR, or agents. What's the difference between those and the full-fledged EDR solutions?
So full EDR solutions are really powerful, but they can be pretty resource intensive and you might need some specialized expertise to manage them. Light EDR or agents offer a lighter weight alternative that's easier to deploy and manage. They're great for companies that might not have the resources for a full EDR deployment, but they still offer a lot of the essential security features, like monitoring suspicious processes and network connections. They just have a smaller footprint and they're easier to handle.
So a good option for businesses that want to beef up their security without overcomplicating things.
Definitely.
Now, what about NDR, network detection and response? What does that bring to the table?
So NDR is all about analyzing network traffic to spot any signs of malicious activity. It's like having a surveillance system that's watching every car that enters and leaves your city. NDR looks for things like unusual patterns of communication attempts to access restricted areas or any signs of data being stolen. It's particularly useful for detecting threats that you might not be able to see at the device level, like attacks that target network devices or exploit vulnerabilities in communication protocols.
Okay, so we've got SIEM acting as the detective, SO automating responses, EDR guarding the devices, and NDR keeping an eye on the network. What about DNS monitoring? Where does that fit in?
DNS monitoring is all about controlling access to your network. It's like having a security guard at the entrance to your city, checking IDs and turning away anyone who looks suspicious. It focuses on analyzing traffic that goes through the domain name system, which is essentially the phone book of the internet. By doing this, you can identify and block attempts to connect with known bad actors or websites that are associated with things like phishing and malware distribution.
Wow. It sounds like all these tools working together create a pretty impressive web of protection. But we talked earlier about how technology is only one part of the equation. The human element is just as important. Right?
Oh, absolutely. You need those skilled security professionals who can analyze all this data, interpret all those alerts, and respond appropriately to those threats. That's why the Cuebid guide puts so much emphasis on 24/7 monitoring and having that team of experts on call.
Yeah, let's dive into that in part 2.
Sounds good.
See you there. Welcome back to our deep dive on SOC services.
Oh.
So we've laid out the basics. Now let's talk strategy. You're a business decision maker. You're trying to figure out how to protect your organization. What are the most important things you should be thinking about when you're choosing a SOC solution?
Well, I think one of the first things you need to consider is your risk tolerance. What kind of data are you handling? What would happen if there was a breach? How much risk are you comfortable with?
That makes sense. The Cuebid guide emphasizes that absolute security doesn't exist. So it's really about knowing your vulnerabilities and making smart decisions based on your specific situation.
Right, exactly. And if you're in a sector like healthcare or finance where you're dealing with really sensitive information, obviously your tolerance for risk is going to be a lot lower.
Right.
And that might lead you towards a more comprehensive solution, maybe an external SOC or a hybrid approach.
And of course, budget's always a big factor. We talked earlier about how expensive it can be to build an internal SOC from scratch.
Yeah, that's a huge consideration.
Yeah.
You have to think about staffing, technology infrastructure, 24/7 monitoring. It all adds up really quickly. And that's one of the reasons why external SOCs, those MDR services, are becoming such an attractive option for a lot of companies. You get access to that expertise and that technology, but at a more predictable cost.
So let's talk about MDR for a minute. When
Yeah.
you go with MDR, you're basically handing over your cybersecurity to someone else. What are the most important things that business leaders should look for in an MDR partner?
Well, expertise is absolutely crucial. You want a provider that really knows the threat landscape, understands the latest attack techniques, and has a proven track record. Look beyond the marketing hype. Ask about certifications, industry recognition testimonials from other clients,
Yeah.
Do your homework. Make sure they can actually back up their claims.
Don't just take their word for it.
Exactly. And then take a really close look at their technology. What kind of SOC platform do they have? Will it work with your systems? Do they use those advanced tools? We talked about SIEM, SOAR, EDR.
Yeah.
You want to make sure everything is comparable and that the integration will be smooth.
And of course, 24/7 monitoring and rapid response are essential. Remember what we saw in that Arctic Wolf report? Attackers can move incredibly fast.
Oh, yeah, it's crucial. You need a provider that's constantly on guard and can react quickly to contain a threat before it has a chance to spread. It's like having a security guard who's always on duty, not just during business hours.
And speaking of vigilance, Cuebid talks a lot about this holistic approach to SOC services.
Yeah.
How does that play out in the context of MDR?
So with holistic approach, the provider is looking at your entire security landscape, not just individual pieces. They're gathering data from multiple sources, networks, devices, user activity, cloud services. They want to build a complete understanding of your vulnerabilities.
So it's like having a security team that's constantly patrolling your entire digital perimeter, looking for any weak spots.
That's a great way to put it. A good MDR provider understands that security isn't just about technology. It's about people and processes too. They'll work with you to develop security policies, train your employees, and create a culture of security awareness throughout your organization.
So it's a multifaceted approach. They recognize that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to cybersecurity.
Exactly. And that's what really sets a good MDR provider apart. They become an extension of your team. They're working with you to protect your business from all those evolving threats.
Now, Cuebid also talks about the importance of communication. Why is that so important when you're working with an MDR partner?
Well, you're trusting them with some of your most valuable assets, so transparency and open communication are really essential. You want a provider that keeps you informed, explains what's happening in a way that you can understand, and gives you regular reports and updates. It's about building that trust and that real partnership.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the human element, something that Cuebid also highlights in their guide. Technology is great, but ultimately it's people who are analyzing that data, making decisions, and responding to threats. Why is that expertise so crucial in cybersecurity?
Because technology is only as good as the people who are using it.
Yeah.
You need experienced security analysts who not only understand the technology, but can also interpret the data, recognize patterns, and know the difference between something harmless and a real threat.
So it's not just about technical skills, it's about having that intuition and the ability to think like an attacker.
Right, exactly. And those skills are hard to find. The cybersecurity field is facing a huge skill shortage, which is another reason why MDR services are becoming so popular. You get access to a whole team of skilled analysts who are constantly training and learning to stay ahead of the curve.
So when you're evaluating an MDR provider, it's important to ask about their team's experience certifications, the kind of training programs they have in place.
Absolutely. You want to know that they're investing in their people and making sure they have the knowledge and skills to protect your business.
We've talked a lot about rapid response,
Yeah.
but can you break that down a little bit? What does that actually involve? And why is speed so important when you're dealing with a cyber attack?
So rapid response is all about damage control. The moment a threat is detected, every second counts. You need to act fast to contain it, stop it from spreading, and start fixing things. That might involve isolating systems, blocking IP addresses, resetting accounts, restoring data from backups.
So it's like a digital fire drill.
Exactly. You need to have a plan and be ready to put it into action quickly and efficiently. And the faster you can respond, the less damage the attacker can do. Remember that Arctic Wolf report? They said attackers can sometimes compromise a system in just a few hours. If you're not watching your systems 24/7 and you don't have a solid response plan in place, you're basically giving the attackers free rein.
So it's not just about finding the threat, it's about being able to neutralize it before it can really hurt you.
Right. And that's where the expertise of a good MDR provider really makes a difference. They have the tools, the processes, the people to respond to incidents quickly and effectively. They can minimize downtime and reduce the potential damage.
This has been a really great conversation. I think we've covered a lot of ground when it comes to understanding SOC services and how to choose the right solution. Should we wrap things up in part 3?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into SOC services, let's recap some of the key takeaways for you to keep in mind when thinking about your organization's security.
Yeah, it's pretty clear now in today's world, a SOC is no longer a luxury. It's a necessity. That data from the Arctic Wolf report is a stark reminder that attacks are becoming more frequent, more sophisticated, and much more damaging.
Right, and it's not just a concern for big companies anymore. Every business, no matter the size, needs to have a plan to protect itself.
Exactly. And the good news is there are options for everyone. Internal SOCs, external SOCs, or MDR, and the hybrid approach. The right solution really depends on your specific situation, how much risk you're willing to accept, and of course, your resources.
But regardless of which path you choose, there are some non-negotiables when it comes to SOC services.
Absolutely. 24/7 monitoring is essential. Attacks can happen at any time, so you need to be constantly vigilant to catch and respond quickly. And of course, you need skilled professionals. Whether you're building an internal team or partnering with an external provider, that expertise is paramount.
We talked a lot about the benefits of MDR and how it can be a great option for a lot of companies. You get that high level of expertise in technology without having to build and manage everything yourself.
Right. It's a strategic partnership that lets you focus on what you do best, running your business. And you get that peace of mind knowing that your cybersecurity is in capable hands.
And that holistic approach that Cuebid talks about is so important. It's not just about implementing technology. It's about building a security strategy that protects your entire organization, including your people and processes.
You got it. It's about building a culture of security awareness, training your employees, establishing strong security policies, and making sure everyone understands that they play a part in keeping data safe.
So as we finish up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this final thought. If an attacker only needs to find one weakness to succeed, shouldn't you have a team dedicated to finding and fixing those weaknesses before they do?
It's definitely something to consider as you plan your security strategy.
I hope you found this deep dive into SOC services helpful. Remember, in cybersecurity, knowledge is power. The more you know about the threats and the options you have, the better prepared you'll be to protect your business.
Stay safe out there.
And thanks for joining us.